Hi, this is Andre Koen, and I want to say thank you so much for joining us in this conversation about group dynamics. And so, in this particular conversation, we're going to talk about what kinds of things should you be looking for as your groups develop. But before we get to that, I just want to say. If you like what we're creating here, if you could like and subscribe, hit that thumbs up, you'll be alerted to the new content that we're putting up, and join us in the conversation. We're trying to build a community of trainers and workshop leaders, educators who are really trying to be effective in this human relations space. So, without further delay, let's get into this. So, many of you may be familiar with this concept of group dynamics around the notion of forming, norming, storming, and performing. And so, what we know is that is a cyclical process. Well, actually, it's a kind of dual process, right? So it can be cyclical, but it also can. It does not have to be sequential, meaning that one follows the other, right? So this notion of forming is really recognizing as a facilitator, a person who's going to drive or hold this process for the group, recognizing why the group is coming together, right? So this notion of forming. And so in the formation is being clear about what the ground rules are, the notion of the rationale of the relationships of the individuals. And so as a facilitator, that becomes an important thing to understand. And so once the group has formed, they typically form around an issue or a purpose. Then we get to this thing called the norming process. Well, and norming really is talking about how will we do our work, right? So what is above the line behavior and below the line behavior, and the line being those things that are acceptable to the group, as well as what helps us functionally do the work, right? So this notion of norming, we will set the norms, the ground rules, the way we'll talk to each other, the ways we won't talk to each other, the types of interactions that we will have as a group as we strive to be effective at our task, the reason we formed in the first place. And then next is this is probably the most critical part of this of this cycle of group dynamics, and that's really focusing on the storming. And storming could also be, if you think about that metaphor of a storm, there's turbulence, right? There are challenges, and so this is where a team either makes it or breaks it. This is where conflicts of conscience, conflicts of leadership styles. This is where all of that stuff starts to come up. And depending on how the group is formed, this actually could be the first step as opposed to kind of this third step. So just be mindful that the concept of storming is to actually get the best work through conflict. So working through conflict, and we've talked a little bit about conflict before. That getting saying, well, we'll just agree to disagree is probably not the best thing for a team in terms of trying to be productive and effective. So this idea of collaboration, building partnerships, as opposed to compromise, is what propels or makes or breaks a team in the storming phase. And then once folks have kind of recognized how we can use our commonalities and differences to their maximum ability, then we are in a place where we can perform. And so that's where, if you look at Abraham Maslow's hierarchy, that's that self-actualization part of a group, right? So the group now understands who can do what works best for the group. We deliver on the reason that we were formed in the first place, and at some point, the performance has to end, which means that the group may disseminate its members to different parts, or may disband itself. And so when we think about this notion of group dynamics, it's not necessarily a linear process. It is a cyclical process, but one can start and stop at any of these points in the group dynamic process. And so as a facilitator, it becomes it behooves you to do an assessment of where your group is. And so some of the indicators that we kind of talked about, right? So forming is not knowing what the purpose is. Norming is setting those ground rules, how we will interact with each other. Storming is that state of conflict that actually yields us to better effectiveness. And then performing is hitting those measures or achieving the goals that we were originally forming to meet, right? And so as a facilitator of a process, then your job is to guide people or be aware of this process so that when you hit snags or there are questions that you're more prepared to help groups work through the problem. Now, here's the key. Your job as a facilitator is not to solve the problems for the group. I cannot force a group through this process. I can tee up some things. I can build some structures that allow them to kind of move through this flow easily. Oftentimes, I play the role of a referee when it comes to some of these things. And in that role of a referee, I simply ask clarifying questions to the group so that they can continue to develop. Because if I solve all the problems, when I'm gone, they won't necessarily have the skills to do that. So as a facilitator, I'm constantly building the skills of the group to navigate through these group dynamics. And I also share this with the groups, right? So I don't use this, I don't keep this as a top secret for myself. I actually share that with the group so that they have the ability to monitor and drive change themselves, right? So that becomes very important to make those create those opportunities for people to learn and grow as you facilitate. Because, well, I won't go into what happens when it's all about me, the facilitator, because the group doesn't grow. Right. So I become the special or magical person in that the group turns to when they should be turning to themselves. Right. So I'm going to stop talking about that because then I'll start spinning and then we'll be here for forever. But before we go, I just want to say again, please like and subscribe if you like what we're putting down. If you can pick up what we're putting down, if you enjoy these tutorial sessions, please like and subscribe. We look forward to working with you. And I want to say thank you again for joining us for addressing group dynamics. And again, my name is Andre Koen, and I want to say thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing who you become.